Uh, a good evening to everybody except the executive decision makers in the Edmonton Oilers organization. Um, it's good to have the Olympics underway here. It's always nice in the summer to have some really high end sports to focus on during the dry spell of hockey coverage. Watching, you know, just top tier athletes across any discipline sport is always cool, especially with women's rugby getting underway today. Maybe not the most important thing to most people, but there is a vested interest in the women's rugby, at least in our circle of friends, as well as usually the men's rugby with Liam as well. So, really good to see a high-end contact sport getting underway in Canada, seemingly doing well in at least one discipline of it. Cleaning up my.
I gotta be real. I was like a little stunned that France just absolutely dismantled Fiji in the gold medal in the game in the way they did. Because like Fiji in sevens is on par with New Zealand in the full time, in like the full like 15 aside version. Like they're freaking dominant. They ran away. They've run away with competitions on a regular basis. So for the host nation to just dismantle them in the way that they did definitely took me by surprise.
Yeah,
But that's why they play the games.
yeah, definitely. Um, real good, just a lot of real good storylines there. South Sudan picking up their first W in Olympic basketball. Just feels real good, as we all love a good underdog story, a
Yeah,
real good comeuppance.
yeah, that exhibition game against the U.S. was like a massive statement for the program alone, who are like only like in the process right now of actually even building their first indoor court, which is remarkable. It's like uh, friggin' like just real impressive like grassroots efforts there being spearheaded by Luol Deng in his administrative role.
Yeah, I'll always love Luau Deng. Mainly, I need to fact check. Okay, yeah, I needed to fact check this to make sure I was thinking of the right player. Of just credit to him for the same reason we give a lot of credit to teams that circumvent the salary cap in the NHL. Like fucking credit to as we all know, Christian is as big of a fuck LA human being as you can be. And Luol Deng's just absolute robbery of the Lakers on that 4-year, 72 million contract was just one of my favorite moments in LA Lakers history. Like, love Deng getting paid, love Deng not winning a championship in LA. Like, big fan of his work, big fan of his fleecing of the Lakers, and a big fan of his play in Chicago. I mean, I always liked playing as him in 2K when he was with the Bulls. So, props to his admin role, props to his playing career, props to him fleecing LA. Pierre-Luc Dubois might have a Luau Deng arc in his career now. I just wish he could have fleeced the Kings for $72 million. But hey, you can't always get what you want. Much like Damien apparently can't get his way onto this stream, no matter how hard I try. I'm also doing a bad job moderating, which is which is fine.
Yeah, it's funny because like that the Deng situation came up because like the it's It's funny thinking about like the turn of events with Dennis Schroeder, how like the Lakers opting to move on to him kind of set off like a chain of events that ultimately culminated in the Celtics trading for Drew Holiday, which of course won them a ring. So that like that bit of self-sabotaging by the Lakers ended up feeding their arch rival and their championship that broke the tie between those two clubs.
It's beautiful. It's definitely beautiful because I don't know the next time a Boston sports team that besides the Celtics is going to be adding to their banner collection. The Sox might put together some decent playoff runs for the next couple of years. And I'll be honest, I am very ignorant to what their future looks like, but I also know that the tides in Major League Baseball apparently are ebbing and flowing pretty aggressively, as far as I can tell, from what teams are competitive year over year. The parity in that league is definitely getting to a point of, the only guarantees in life, and I'm only going off of what I know from my coworkers. The only guarantee in life is that the White Sox suck.
Oh yeah, they're right now vying with the 2003 Detroit Tigers for worst team of the 21st century, which is pretty remarkable considering how fucking atrocious that team was. Like you're talking back, you'd have to go back to like the dead ball era to find a team as inept as that Detroit Tigers team was. So for the White Sox to quite possibly end up being worse is just monumental. That's like a urinating tree level sports meme, pretty much.
So I got to ask a question. I guess we're gonna go down a weird hypothetical right now, since it's the summer and we have time to go down weird hypotheticals. Who would win a team sports triathlon? The 23-24 Chicago White Sox or the 13-14 Buffalo Sabres? And I think the better question is, would the White Sox win at hockey, and could the Sabres beat them at baseball? And then what third sport would we throw in to make it interesting?
Holy shit.
Now, this is a hypothetical I wish was pursued more often, of just putting the worst teams of, generations against each other and just, I guess, there were a lot of North American players. So I guess the third sport would probably have to be like a 7-on-7 flag football game. You'd think that the White Sox would probably have an edge in quarterback play because they have to have at least like one either pitcher or fielder who could whip darts out there. But at the same time, like if it's 7-on-7 tackle, like having Tyler Myers at left tackle is probably like an actual fucking flex play. And you think about a guy like, I don't know, Cody Hodge, like I guess Tyler Ennis would be such a menace up the middle as a running back because like low center of gravity, but like the dynamic athleticism of an NHL player. Like I would pay to have watched this if Steve Ott out there playing safety. And I just want to point out both of these teams are still better than Damien at getting onto this episode.
Here we go.
Here he goes. This is Damien getting onto our pod is pretty much the equivalent of Tyler Ennis playing wide receiver against any player on the White Sox roster. I'll be honest, I couldn't name a single one.
Yeah. Facts. His free throws would be too common.
Yeah, now I gotta look at this White Sox roster and see. I also have watched too much not baseball because I had to type in 2023-24 White Sox, forgetting that baseball is only played within one calendar year in the season.
The one thing I'll say about that is like they are perennially like at least for like the last handful years approximately, irrelevant at least. So it's not like you're going to see a massive change in quality of personnel from year to year. So there is that.
Damn, the only guy on that whole roster that I recognize are Benintendi and Andrew Vaughn, surprisingly enough.
Yeah, let's see.
Which tells you how much baseball I pay attention to,
Yeah.
The
Well,
last
I
time,
mean, to be fair to you, like the most noteworthy players on this team are guys who are setting like not records per se, but very low benchmarks and have been noted for how poor they're performing in important categories like batting average and on base plus slugging, and just getting dragged through the media for that.
do, now based on your knowledge, do they have, like, is Andrew Benintendi effectively like their Mikhail Granlund for the Sharks last year, where like, we're looking at a historically bad team and you just have one veteran depth role player that is just performing at a higher level than you probably expected, but it's completely irrelevant because he's only basically being evaluated in the contrast of his egregiously underperforming peers.
Yeah, well, kind of. Like his slash marks are like, mildly above average for like the by the standards of the league. But last year he also did lead all left fielders in the American League in fielding errors. So even he's contributing to their ineptitude at this point. He has been honestly pretty mediocre to bad, in contrast with how his trajectory started for the most part since leaving Boston. So I'm not terribly surprised. He did have some success with the Royals before the Yankees inadvisably swung a trade for him, only for him to pretty much immediately go on the injured list for a good chunk of his tenure. So
Speaking of, I guess, well, I'm just going to pick on the Sharks. You looking back on some of our expectations last offseason, watching Philip Zadina, with all the hype that came with him getting a fresh start in San Jose, and I love watching a guy get a fresh start, but man, is it really fucking painful to watch him get that fresh start and then proceed to play the worst hockey he's played in his professional career? Like, how the fuck? Like, I can't even think, like, trying to think of a cross-sport parallel for, like, how the fuck do you get out of the Iser plan and all of its dysfunction and, like, delusions of grandeur to somehow get a fresh start and then somehow do even worse. Like, like it's kind of the opposite of Kadarius Toney, where like he got a fresh start, but for a much worse team, and somehow was even worse than he ever was at any point in his career. But somehow, like Kadarius Toney, like found a way to almost single-handedly, even though he tried to use two, single-handedly fucking derail a Chiefs Super Bowl run, while also doxing people and putting out death threats on social media, which is like next level shenanigans. Meanwhile, Philip Zadina is just, maybe he has a better year next year with the Shacks, if he's still even there. I'll be honest, I have to cover the Sharks in an article at some point, and I haven't really paid much attention to what they've done, besides their highest paid players being a third line defenseman and a guy on LTIR. God, I love it.
it's gonna be like, you know, when considering obviously massive ceilings on like both of those guys, and maybe it is the right thing for like their individual dev, but like with their best, biggest like future talent assets being Celebrini and Smith, like I don't know if I like would like if I were a fan or whatever, I don't know if I would be like super approving of the fact that there it's such a delicate balance when coming to like the when like rebuilding via the draft. And like, is it the best, easiest way to like bring talent into your org? Sure, but like when you have those thrust those guys into the demands of that situation by giving them their ELC very early on and just thrusting them into the roster of a terrible situation, like you're burdening them with a lot very early on, and it also sort of inoculates them, or rather, just sort of cultivates this like these difficult habits when you know that you're going to be in a losing situation for at least another 2, maybe 3 years or something along those lines. So it's like uh, you can expect more of the same for them, yet at the same time, uh, you're also like looking at a long-term picture that's probably even worse than what you originally projected and have already experienced.
That was real interesting on Twitter watching just a really disillusioned Pacific hockey observer. I'm not going to call him a fan because his lack of awareness, and I don't remember which account it was. I kind of blocked it out of my mind. But, a guy just sitting there really preying on Edmonton's downfall, which, like, I'm preying on Edmonton's downfall as much as, if not more than the next guy. But to prey on their downfall and talk about how the Flames and the Sharks are about to, like, run that division is fucking unbelievably uneducated. Like, the Sharks, like, for all that the Sharks are, their blue line, like, core of the future is completely, like, like, Henry Thrun was the odd man out in Anaheim's young core, so he was considered our 10th best D prospect, and now he's, like, on their NHL roster. Like, Mario Ferraro's mid as fuck. Ty Emberson's meh. Jan Ruta is just kind of there, and like Jake Wallman's a great pickup, but like the thought that this team is anywhere fucking conceivably close to being, legitimately competitive. Like, yeah, Eklund's developing well, Zetterlund's developing well, but like it's such an incomplete team with like even with the addition of Celebrini and Smith, like it's not like this team was like they weren't even competitive last season. Like, and even like the Calgary Flames, at least the fucking Flames were competitive most of the year. But like now that they're into their rebuild, like I'm not exactly like enthusiastic about the turnaround time for the Flames like being good, like legitimately competitive. Like, sure, the Edmonton Oilers are a morally bankrupt organization with absolutely glaring holes in their organizational depth, as we've like addressed it at multiple points. But like, at the end of the day, Macklin Celebrini is never, and I'm gonna say this, and if I end up being wrong, I don't even fucking care. Macklin Celebrini will not be as good as Connor McDavid. Will Smith might be as good as Leon Draisaitl when all is said and done. You still gotta fill your other fucking 16 roster spots with guys who have the two-way play, like the goal scoring, the finishing, the grit of a Zach Hyman, the two-way brains of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Guys like Evan Bouchard don't come around that often. Like, guys like that are hard to develop. You're not going to find a Matthias Ekholm, like, lurking in the wild. And you're not going to get a perennially mid second-pairing defenseman making $9 million a year in Darnell Nurse. And yes, do I think Darnell Nurse is overpaid and very overrated? Yes. He's still better than every single fucking defenseman on San Jose's roster, and it's not close. Like, at least Calgary has, like, they still have Rasmus Anderson, who's also better than every defenseman on San Jose's roster. They have Kevin Ball, who's better than 5 out of the 6 defensemen on San Jose's roster. They have Uyghur, who's better than every defenseman on San Jose's roster. They have Zane Parekh, who's a better defensive prospect than anybody in San Jose's organization right now. And I say all this for both teams because at the end of the day, Edmonton is far more likely to be usurped by the team that already fucking usurped them in Vancouver this year. They're more likely to be usurped by LA during their supernova flash of the last 2 years of Kopitar's competency, in the last 2 years of Doughty's competency, and they're far more likely to be usurped by Vegas and their never-ending door of high star power acquisitions. Like, I don't understand how you can look at what the Sharks and Flames are doing and look at where the Anaheim Ducks are and say, yeah, we're about to turn the corner within a couple of years, when even the Ducks are 3 years out from being anything.
And for whatever else, he may be, and for whatever he may be going to be, I think at minimum, and it's probably going to be even more than that, and then probably additional time in the AHL with the CUDA. Sam Dickinson at minimum this year is going to go back and try to finish his unfinished business and get the Memorial Cup that just narrowly evaded him. And then we're talking this kid is probably going to be at least 22 before he's, in their top four. Probably maybe 1 or 2 more years before he's a top pairing defenseman. And then when you add on top of that, his ceiling is not going to have him in the top 5 to 10% defenseman in that league. I definitely think he's someone who can bolster a top 4, but I don't think the Dickinson selection alone is something that significantly moved the needle with their defensive prospect options.
Is Devin Cooley not on the roster anymore? I don't think he is. Because I think they have Blackwood, Vanacek as...
Well, the reason Devin Cooley's not on the roster anymore is he plays for Calgary.
Ah, there's the tie.
And to be specific, the Wranglers, not the Flames. He may end up backing up Dustin Wolf down the stretch this year. I mean, yeah, it's clear and obvious that, realistically, Wolf should be the starter. There's really no reason Wolf won't be the starter. He'll probably be backed up by Vladar. And, Cooley will probably hold down the A show. If not, push Vladar out of his backup spot. The Flames are going to be interesting. I'm tired of saying they're going to be a playoff team because they keep letting me down every year. They're not. The Flames are in a point where they're in a retool rebuild, which is really fascinating to think of. This is a team, when you look at their current roster, that sold off a bunch of their best players over the last few years and still have more roster talent than, the Sharks, the Blackhawks, Suns, Connor Bedard, realistically, the Blue Jackets. Crazy that a team that's been selling at the rate they've been selling at still has so much roster talent. Of course, Jonathan Huberdeau. Yeah. I'd like to see Hubes be better than he's been there. Not going to hold my breath on it. Can't wait for Treliving to give out an equally egregious contract in Toronto in the next couple of years. I mean, I think the worst thing, though, about the Huberdeau contract is so fascinating. Really, when you look at, his goal, it is fascinating when you look at his career, really. Last year, he wasn't even, 2022-23, he wasn't even that bad. He was on par, realistically, with the, all-around production that he did, during the 17-18 campaign, which was, yes, a down year for Florida, pardon me, but, like, sure, like, 22-23 was a regression from, what we had come to expect from Huberdeau over the last, 4 prior seasons. But the fact that he followed that up with objectively the worst year of his career is fucking baffling. Like, it's amazing how under Daryl Sutter he was underwhelming, but yet under Ryan Huska he was downright mediocre. Like, he was more or less a replacement level forward last year in Calgary. And that's, like, one of the craziest fucking fall-offs I've ever seen. Like, to be fair, he wasn't bad. He was just, like, a $2 million player making $10.5 million. But, like, at least to the credit of Treliving, he wasn't buying on a devaluing asset that was 1 year removed from a career year, as opposed to what the Kraken just did with Brandon Montour, which will very highly likely be looked at as one of the worst free agent signings of the last couple of years when it's all said and done. Like, I'm trying to think of a similar scenario across sport where, like, a team just everything said, like, he didn't even go off in a contract year. He went off the year before the contract year and is already regressing back to his own mean of being, like, a bottom 4 defenseman at best. Not Jeremy Lin. I have a thought. I gotta chase. I gotta chase out the player I'm thinking of here to see if I'm gonna fire this shot. See if I'm gonna throw shade at an NFL player. Yeah, I guess, is this the NHL equivalency of the Washington Redskins signing Adam Archuleta? Like, by the time Archuleta had hit free agency out of St. Louis, like, we already knew, by and large, with the exception of the guys who programmed ratings in Madden, that, like, this dude was already in a downswing. He was already 2 years removed from, being real. Like, he was already a year removed from a 5-sack season. He was already 2 years removed from his highest AV season. He was 2 years removed from his only 100-tackle season. Like, the Washington Redskins should have known that this dude was, like... So I guess Brandon Montour might go on, especially with how short of a career run he had prior to free agency being almost identical to that of Archuleta as well. Like 6 years as a full-time starter, which is also what Archuleta had in St. Louis, give or take. What a comparison. I didn't think I was going to be making this comparison tonight. Shout out to Adam Archuleta for being confused with David Archuleta. Back when American Idol still produced talented singers. Sometimes.
It's funny because, like, I was thinking, like, I kind of had, like, Albert Hainsworth vibes a bit, but at least he had his career high in sacks, like, the year before that deal. But it just, like, blew up in their face because the dude just had no effort to provide left in the tank. Like, he just did not give a fuck after getting the bag.
Deshaun Watson much?
I mean, Deshaun Watson I'm not even gonna chase the Deshaun Watson thing because we've already, at length made fun of Deshaun Watson once on this podcast. And, I really don't want to go back to the well on such an easy target.
Even if we tried, I mean, that was one of the best segments we've ever had. So it would be a fool's errand to try to one up it or try to give it like a worthy sequel.
I guess, yeah, I can't even think of an NHL comp to him because there isn't really a guy that comes to mind that, because the thing is, my initial reaction is Evander Kane, but the difference is Kane had his off-ice scandal and then proceeded to get, a very low-paying salary in Edmonton that he's more or less delivered on while being a questionable locker room presence. It's not like, the deal he signed in San Jose was fresh off of, him being looked at by the league for conduct detrimental to the league, and then he provided to play the worst fucking hockey of his career. I don't really think a guy has had the Deshaun Watson trajectory in the NHL. Because the NHL, despite being an old boys club and being completely morally bankrupt at the highest levels, ironically, especially in the Edmonton organization, as I will never forgive. I mean, even considering all of that, you look at the Watson thing versus the five players from the World Junior Assault scandal. Not one team tendered an offer to those five guys before this has even gone to court. And all four of these teams, New Jersey happens to have employed two of them at the time of this occurring, but nevertheless, these teams are just going to let the legal system take due process before coming to a conclusion on what is the right course of action.
Yeah.
Versus the Cleveland Browns, who are just yeeting money into the wind of worst case scenario, he goes to prison and we never pay him. Best case scenario, we win a Super Bowl and somehow we're once again, like always in Cleveland sports history, sitting in some fucking purgatory somewhere in between that no one's enjoying.
Yeah, it was interesting. I don't know. I almost feel like I have to, in as delicate of a manner as possible. Uh, it's sort of ironic. Uh, I'll put it this way that once the speculation started, the only player to even have any sort of movement between clubs, and for teams to take any sort of potential gamble on it was Cal Foot of those five. He is, and whereas anyone else, we saw it when offers were fielded and there were talks about Carter Hart. When those talks started, I always said that Briere wasn't trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. Because, when you do that as a rookie GM, you're basically, screwing yourself out of having any sort of relationship with clubs. So if you do that on purpose, no one is going to trust you. So I think at that point, it's just teams gambling with their own risks, knowing that, the other shoe might drop. And then but then determining, after a risk assessment, that it was a non-starter for a move to happen. But with Foot, it's I'm not going to say it. I know for sure. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but it is a little bit odd that the one guy who was able to move was the one who was the second generation player, and who is someone who has had familial connections in the sport throughout his entire life. And I think that is the only thing that's sort of a kind of that was a little odd, little bit, of an eyebrow raiser and head shaker in that situation. But other than that, it seems like teams kind of just knew, yeah, we're going to try our best not to, even associate ourselves with this situation if possible. And now,
You know what?
guys in expiring deals, they were just allowed to hit the UFA market, and they're not going to get scooped up, at least not by an NHL team.
Hear me out. I wouldn't be surprised, and I think you already know what I'm about to say because this is going to be a very open dig at an organization. I don't know, man. Based on his history with sexual assaults, Carter Hart's good at. He has to be an Oiler, right? Like, even if he's done nothing, Stan Bowman has to look at, like, we can't win a cup with Stu Skinner.
The only thing I'll say is, like, the teams do generally know, and the courts have determined which those guys aren't a flight risk. But it seems that, and we've already seen it happen with at least Doobie, that the KHL are the ones who have been most proactive in pursuing those guys, as you'd expect. Uh, in fact, I'm pretty sure that Hart has been talked about as being pursued by at least one of those teams, and I think I can see that happening first. Just them going somewhere where they can work and have a fair amount of disposable income because, they're otherwise out of work for 2 years, and where having that big take home at the end of the day, because Russia's taxes are significantly lower than Canada's, so it's like that's ultimately like the way I see this going is that over the next couple of seasons, those guys are most likely going to be employed abroad. It just seems to be like the most logical thing that can happen.
Oh yeah, I will get as many openly unveiled shots in at the Oilers' expense for the next year, because they fucking deserve it. I just had to put the think tank out there.
The thing that's been like, it's hard for me to even like, you know, uh, just thinking about like I have to like peel back that thing in layers, like rather than just focus on like, oh yeah, they made that questionable hiring decision. Like we know, like the person who like who conducted his reformation process was Sheldon Kennedy, who like you know through having his own experience of just this abhorrent thing that happened with people who are in positions of power abusing him, like, and then you know, knowing, and then having become like an advocate, he's Sheldon Kennedy was actually willing, to just absolutely tank his entire reputation for Stan Bowman for some reason, and that might actually be worse than in terms of just like looking at it and just absolute shock than the Oilers bringing him on.
Yeah, it, it continues to be, I guess, just my thought process with Edmonton right now is from a high level. No, from somebody who's in the weeds at this point to backpedal, it just feels like the Edmonton Oilers are in a bizarre pissing contest with PWHL Minnesota of like who can just fuck around and put out the worst PR optics imaginable. Like, at least, like, and then like you hire McDavid, like you go through the Evander Kane saga, you go through the Corey Perry saga, and I'm a Corey Perry fan, but I am well aware that there were serious allegations for him for unprofessional behavior when he was in Chicago. You know, you hire McDavid's fucking old coach. You hire his fucking agent to be your hockey like everything about that just reeks of corruption. Whether or not, like, we all know Chris Knobloch is more than qualified to be an NHL head coach and more than well fucking demonstrated it. But you just look at the old boys club corruption that has gone on in Edmonton over the last 4 to 5 years, and the fact that they do absolutely nothing to repel the narrative. And I almost feel like, I'm not saying the NHL's rigging, but it seems very odd that a team with such poor roster construction that seems to be pandering to the NHL's most outdated and archaic cultural values just so happened to find their way in the Stanley Cup final on the league's biggest stage last season. But hey, this isn't a conspiracy theory podcast. To then look at PWHL Minnesota in an equally similar situation where, I can't even repeat some of the shit that Ken Klee said to his players without fear of being canceled, which is wild that there are things I will not repeat on this podcast that came out of his mouth to players on that team allegedly, and it's all under investigation. Like, amazing that these two organizations continue to just pander to the absolute fucking worst things about hockey culture. And just, there seems to be no consequences that dictate them, changing the way they do things.
It seems to just happen every cycle. Like the Blackhawks have been awarded a first overall pick after, the initial incitement of the Stan Bowman chapter. The San Jose Sharks have completely evaded any sort of public criticism for their own sex abuse scandal. They got the first overall pick. So I mean, I think it's just there's a pattern here of being if you're positioned well in terms of disposition with the regime, they'll treat you well, I guess. But on a lighter note, on well, it's still a little bit heavy, but I'm gonna take this time now in the comment section to plug the GoFundMe page for Tony Vogt's family. If you read my post that I dropped on our Meta platforms, of course, heavily involved in hockey development down in the Philadelphia region, including on the paths of some people who we know and consider friends. The fun to assist his family after his surprising and untimely passing has gotten closer to meeting its goal. But there's still a little bit of a ways to go. So if you can chip in with anything, you can take a look at that link that I will be dropping momentarily. Okay, and it is up. Thank you very much for anybody who helped that gain some visibility, or anyone who's chipped in. I can tell you this matters, to us as well as to some people, who held Tony closely as like a mentor figure and good friend. It was very. I won't disclose names out of respect for privacy, but I did read at least one testimonial to a life, some of the lives that he touched, and it was pretty powerful stuff. Definitely, I didn't have a dry eye reading that. So. We appreciate the support that was given there.
Good moment of silence. We didn't call for it, but we executed it. Good teamwork there, boys.
Yeah.
On a even lighter note, talking about reclamation projects we can all get behind. Really excited for the Alex Nylander signing with the Marlies. Kind of really look forward to a potential deployment this year where maybe he's playing with Johnny T and Willie Nylander. We clearly saw in his brief stint in Columbus last year, and it really makes me question Waddell's regime of, we really saw Alex Nylander cooking at such a level, after all these years of trying to find the right fit. And then he seemingly found it, and then he was let go for nothing, which definitely is an interesting way to do things. But, really optimistic for Alex Nylander to continue the saga that his brother started of both being potentially better than their father. Speaking of, second-gen NHLers. And you say, damn, Alex Nylander's wasted the first half of his career. How is he ever going to be better than their father? But, like, by the same token, it's not like, you know, Michael Nylander blew doors off out of the gates either. I mean, he didn't even, he was drafted in 91, and he didn't even really contribute, like, meaningfully over a long stretch of time for, you know, at any level of consistency. Like, yeah, in Calgary for a couple years, injuries, Tampa, you know, Chicago for 3 years. But like, you know, Michael Nylander didn't really find his footing in the National Hockey League until 14 years or so into his career. So, I mean, if Alex is anything like their father, he should just be turning the corner right about next year. Once again, Pittsburgh should have had more patience.
Yeah. Yeah.
To be fair, he never would have figured it out in Pittsburgh. I mean, he needed to be in an organization that could afford to be patient, which I thought Columbus was, which is where I'm really struggling to understand what Waddell was thinking. Seems a little bizarre to give up on a guy who really just, maybe it's because he just clicked under the coaching staff. I don't know, and we'll never know, maybe, until he like gets called up to the NHL mid-year and is a point-per-game player again somehow. Like, I get it. You've got Gaudreau, Marchenko, Chinakov, Johnson, Jenner, and Voronkov on the wings, but, like, I don't know, man. This is why I don't work in the NHL.
Yeah, real quick.
Because, you know, I don't have any rich family members that work in the NHL, so I can't even be a Nepo
Yeah.
hire.
Yeah, I figured that's where you were going with that.
Right.
It'd be like that, though.
Yeah. And it makes me feel bad for the second generation guys who are actually, like, legitimately competent on an overwhelming level, and then they just get, like, overshadowed because it's just the mindset. Which is why, like, you really like, and I don't know if they're second gen, and I am making a bold assumption, but you know, it really, really speaks to Chris and Mike Greer. Like, in two sports that are so fucking heavily dictated by nepotism, to hold lead executive offices, it's just really fucking cool.
Yeah, I mean Bobby Greer, their dad,
Yeah.
had, you know, like some repute. He held some repute within the Patriots org. But like, you know, these guys, like, when you look at their individual resumes that they like have carved out, like they've done a lot of that work, you know, and gotten those achievements, like you know, on their own standing and on the merit of their own abilities. And I also want to give a quick RIP to Bobby Greer, who passed away last month on that topic. Uh, you know, just very important sports figure. Just like generally speaking, uh, you know, definitely like aside from these, you know, secondhand impacts, you could say. Hold on a minute.
Oh, no worries, man.
Yes, that's right. That gets me tripped up sometimes. because there were two classic Bobby Greer football figures. Fortunately, Mike and Chris's father is very much still alive, doing quite well, working in his consultancy capacity in the Dolphins organization. It was the elder of the two Bobby Greers that went along similar paths that passed away last month. Had to double check on that. Bullet dodge.
Damn, that's crazy though. Like shit. Like people talk about two Sebastian Ahos, but man, imagine having two like high caliber league builders with the same name. Like,
Yeah, that were born like 10 years apart, so they're pretty much from
yeah,
the same generation. Like,
that's wild. It's two builders. You know, not necessarily, at least in the case of yeah, fuck it. You know, really, not Hall of Fame builders, but still like relevant, important builders in the league. And you know, it is kind of a shame to me that the NFL doesn't acknowledge the builders in their Hall of Fame the same way hockey does at this point.
right.
Like, stop putting fucking owners in the Hall of Fame just for the sake of how much money they spent, and actually like look to guys who built the sport, the league. And you know, I think Bill Belichick would be right there with us on this point, since that's his whole shtick. You know, love him or hate him for his leadership strategies that do or do not work with the modern age of Gen Z athletes, but like in terms of historians of their game, you know, that's the thing that we're going to miss the most when the time inevitably comes when Bill Belichick's not either on television around football, like young football players, or, you know, on this earth. You know, just a true fucking historian of the game. And it's weird how we don't really have that as much in hockey as we used to. Like, people fucking clamor for Don Cherry, who ended up becoming just a very unreliable narrator of that era of the sport, and started letting his fucking personal and political biases impact his perception of the game. And, you know, it's a damn shame that we don't really have, you know, and that's one of the things that I like about the PWHL's presentation in its inaugural season, is they really spent a lot of their time and their focus, you know, instead of, you know, making sure PWHL Minnesota is not a cesspool of fucking Chicago Oilers energy. You know, since they're ignoring that problem, you know, they've done a very, very good job of fixating on the builders, you know, both on and off the ice, that have allowed women's hockey to, you know, have a legitimate professional league for the first time, which, you know, is its own thing. You know, we're never gonna have, you know, a Caitlin Clark for the same in women's hockey, for the same reason that Sidney Crosby's the face of the NHL, of just the sport doesn't loan itself to individual characters and personalities. Like, Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid are as hated as Caitlin Clark is, and probably less. They're less hated than LeBron James, because LeBron James, good basketball player, well-intentioned human, very hateable at both. And, you know, the PWHL, the way that hockey is, I just don't see women's hockey producing a superstar that is just hateable. And unfortunately, hateability is so marketable in the modern sports world. I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs, the New England Patriots, you know, Jason Tatum's corny ass. Like, you know, guys having things that other fan bases can hate is so important for the marketability of a league. And man, yeah. Problem is, Ken Klee's currently that guy for the PWHL, and that's bad, because he's hateable for bad reasons. He's hateable on humanitarian levels, not for reasons that you know, I loved to hate Joe Pavelski, man.
Yeah, it was
I
real.
love to hate Connor McDavid. Every Bruins fan, none of them will admit this, but they love to hate Matthew Tkachuk. They don't hate Matthew Tkachuk. They love to hate him. And there's a difference. And I know I'm getting a little weird here towards the end of this episode, but like there's a difference between a player that you love to hate for in the spirit of sport and in really the blood sport energy that fueled the Roman Colosseums. And then, Rod Smart, he hate me. Is all in this realm. This isn't like a guy like a Manny Pacquiao or a Floyd Mayweather or a Ken Klee in this instance or a Todd Bertuzzi. Or like you look at some of the things that these people have done and they're just morally bankrupt in a lot of the facets of what they contribute to what they do. And I don't love to hate Floyd Mayweather. I don't love to hate Manny Pacquiao. I never wanted to hate Ken Klee, and I hate where he's driven people to hate the game that they've played. He's driving people to hate the sport of hockey. Like, that is I can't fuck with that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, but here's my question, though. With the combat sports figures in mind, have you ever loved to hate John Jones?
I don't pay him enough mind to really have much of an opinion on him. Like Conor McGregor, for the most part, is a guy who people love to hate.
Yeah.
In recent years, he's had some hateable moments, but, he's never stooped to the levels, and I always look at Floyd and Pacquiao very specifically. Floyd because he's Floyd, and Pacquiao because a lot of his influence on politics in his country is genuinely dangerous to people that live there. Yeah. It's like, yeah. Like, Bones Jones, like, I don't know a ton about him. I know he's nuts, which comes from combat sports. In the words of Eric's younger brother, I'm basically speedrunning CTE. So I kind of expect it from the MMA guys.
Yeah.
As long as you're not substantially endangering a large mass of people.
Well, yeah. Well, of course, it's complicated because according to studies, the rate of CTE is actually higher in boxing than it is in MMA because it prioritizes head contact more. When I think about John Jones, I think about like a guy who's like been gifted like these natural skills that very, 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 very few people have, and then ends up taking it for granted, such as him having been popped for PEDs that he does not need, and having made various other choices, some of which have caused harm to others, some of which have come at the expense of himself, where he just seems to not be able to stay out of his way, and then some of his opinions on matters, like with him not being able to stay off Twitter while he descends into madness while being a victim of his own hubris, has rubbed people the wrong way. But my personal opinion on him overall, and I think a lot of fans also feel this way when they're not professional haters on him, it's like, hey, he's done more good for that product than harm. He's done a lot to elevate its profile. So, I mean, I would consider him like, in that class where it's like, yeah, he has been like the natural heel a number of times, but it's in a way that's been more of a benefit than a detriment, I think.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy how, like, it's amazing out of those three siblings.
Arthur Jones is the most well-adjusted.
Yeah, and it's so funny how like the New York Post has put out a hit piece on him during his career, comparing him to his brothers, of just like he got a PED violation. And it's just like, wow, Arthur Jones used steroids to try to accelerate recovering from an injury to provide for his family and got suspended doing so. I don't understand how that levels him to either of his brother's various antics. Because outside of that one PED violation, like Arthur Jones is pretty much never talked about other than like he was a good defensive end. He wasn't great, but he was good. Like he's not, and to the credit of John, Chandler Jones is I'm not gonna say he's done worse things, but he's definitely crazier. The CTE has started to apparently take Antonio Brown level effects on poor
Yeah.
Chandler. And Arthur Jones, though, credit where credit's due, man. He hasn't publicly let his brothers permeate his peace. And I think that's fucking beautiful, man. And with that, are we ready to hit the runway on our big finish?
Uh, you know, on that topic, I do have one last zinger. The Jones brothers, maybe it's just a strength in numbers thing, but they have an advantage of that they can say there's at least a sane one amongst them, where with the Kachuk brothers, there is no sane one in that ranks. Uh, um, so, quickly knocks down some dev stuff before I hit my point of the week. We're a couple of days into the Hlinka Gretzky camp. We'll have that come to a wrap and have the final selections whittled down on Tuesday with the actual tournament taking place between the 5th and the 10th in Edmonton. Um, I kind of hinted at this last week, but I definitely am more impressed by the select camp roster for Canada than for the U.S. as far as like the big time uh, countries of note go, but you never know. We'll see. I mean, it's not like Hockey Canada hasn't made poor selection choices and paid the price for it in these underager tournaments in recent memory. With the World Junior Showcase, summer showcase going on as well, we're starting to get a bit of a better feel for the talent pool. Of note, I was keeping up with Chris Peters' coverage of Team USA Blue versus Canada versus Sweden. Sorry, I was still thinking about my potentially incendiary take there in that process. But yeah, the Team Blue won against Sweden by a score of 7-2 today. Of note, the effective substitute for Will Smith in that Peralt Leonard combination was James Haggins, and I tell you, especially on the power play, that combination looks pretty fucking lethal. They saw some time accompanied by Zeev Boyum and William Whitelaw on Power Play 1 as well. Definitely some good results that came out of that. It's definitely, going to be a threatening combination if that's maintained. If they determine that that's maintained and they maintain their form, when the final tournament comes around in the wintertime. Uh, and I'm going to take a look just quickly at what some of Peter's takeaways were. Let's see. Team White also faced off against Finland and won 3-2 in the first game of the showcase. That was kind of like a feeling things out sort of game. There's a lot of sloppiness, but there were some noteworthy performances. Cole Hudson, goal and assist. He made some execution mistakes that were, a bit of an eyebrow raiser, but impactful performance, showed some forward movement, some good looks from Quentin Musty, who scored a goal in that game as well. Let's see. Boyum's performance was highlighted for Team Blue in that Sweden matchup. He's starting to be a bit more engaged in his own zone. It looks like, and Max Plant was given some credit, and as was Noah Powell, who was definitely looking good in sort of that bottom six PKer role. And obviously Haggins just had an absolutely dominant performance. So that was um, a very noteworthy, definitely, like, you can have some meaningful analysis and takeaways about these performances and where these guys are headed. Some quick individual updates from Peters. Drew Fortescue and Danny Nelson were both in camp, but neither will be playing in games this week for maintenance purposes. That was more or less the case for Tom Villander as well. Was named to the roster, but is not able to participate due to injury. The indication that I got from what I saw was that it's not serious, but it was effectively a precaution by Team Sweden. So so that pretty much covers it for dev stuff this week. It'll be a little bit more involved when the Hlinka Gretzky actually rolls around. And we'll keep everyone posted when the final rosters are selected for the WJC as well. But for this week, my take, let's see. So I guess I'll just give my quick hit reaction to the Travis Konechny extension. Yeah, I'm not in love with it. You can't really defend it without at least prefacing it with that on the deal, on its face. Like, the deal sucks, and it's not because of the money. It's actually, the cap hit actually isn't that bad contrasted with what it could have been. But like, when you consider like where he's like ranked amongst highest paid forwards in the league, and how you can't really justify it with his performance, along with the max term. Like, 8-year deal for a guy whose playing style isn't really going to age very well. It's just not something I can smile upon. But like, I think that the merit there, I'm gonna just definitely agree with what our boy Dark by Design, his handle, his first name being Chris, a guy who's started to churn out articles of his own, put out some pretty good stuff. Everything he's put out has definitely been worthy of reading and sharing. It's like, if you're gonna have him there as like a guy who's like taking heat away from Michkov, with him being on the roster this coming year and having these valuable dev seasons ahead of him, like, if you're gonna have a guy who's already like very much an antagonist by nature, like and to have like contributions in 5v5 and on the PK, although that's part of the issue, is that like the guys who don't step up on the power play are the guys who, as Eric Tulsky noted in an article that was written 10 years ago and has aged phenomenally well, are the guys who are not going to have as much staying power. But like, having a guy who has always been, just an absolute pest and is going to be like the guy who's like ends up targeting the retaliation, and while still having something to offer on offense, and for like the coming years, is like something, to have him be the guy that's hated by the other team rather than your franchise star. There is value in that, and plus, like, is it probably destined for a buyout? Most likely, but at least we were not going to say that the contract absolutely sucks year to year until we start to get into the last like couple of seasons. So in the immediacy, I think the deal is actually more valuable from like a win now standpoint than it even seems. We're not gonna love it by the time it ends, but can I at least, defend aspects of it? Sure.
Makes sense. Yeah, so two quick points. Obviously, this weekend was the 7th annual Hartford Whalers Alumni Weekend. So again, guys like Kevin Janine were there. Fortunately, Joe Quenville was also there. So, I'm not sure we'll see obviously what comes from that. But the other big, obviously, exciting news is Patrick Launay coming back, being reinstated from the clavicle. So, pretty excited for that.
Yeah, man. Like he still has like so much to offer to teams. Like I really like am glad that we're gonna be seeing him out there again soon, and I really hope we see the absolute best version of him.
Oh, yeah.
And I like how where I'm going with this ties up a lot of the things that we were talking about tonight, and actually kind of spins off of Line A. Glad to see another year of the Shoulder Check Foundation continuing to grow its platform for mental health awareness and really empathy in the hockey world, and really exposing it to youth players, and really seeing, the platform that Trevor Zegras and Kevin Shattenkirk used in this year's meeting. But really love the extension of having, Jonathan Quick involved this year, Spencer Knight and Kevin Hayes after their battles, Shane Pinto being involved this year, Sonny Milano. But as Damien's phone probably dies on the charger again, some good PWHL content, having Abby Rock, Ella Shelton, Jesse Eldridge, and Micah Zandy Hart involved. Just really love the overall growth of that side of the game, of driving encouragement, empathy, and just connecting people, and making people more aware of the mental health battle on such a large scale. You really love to see it.
For sure. You know, like just uh, for all that's wrong culturally, like there are in general like athletes that just like I can justify, aside from the fact that their careers are shorter than a lot of other professionals due to the physical risk, like I can justify their salaries being what they are uh because of the fact that they're more prone to use it for communal good, especially when it's addressing specific issues, like than so many other professions as well. Like, and it's like, um, I definitely see like the better side of like the culture of ice hockey doing that very very well. Like you see it on the grassroots level a lot, and just like these phenomenal organizations of like or the phenomenal organizing of events and things like that. It's a good reminder of what this sport is capable of. But yeah, um, that's about it uh, for this week. Uh, Maybe next week will be a little less tangential. I will have more, age grade stuff to talk about. Uh, like, things are starting to shape up there a bit. Hopefully, someone will surprise us with another trade or something. Like, the free agency market's been dead for a while. The initial wave lasted like a few days at the beginning of the July, but we'll dig something up. And if not, I can always like just come in with a bullet point that's like, the right kind of esoteric for this time of year that we can probably riff on for like 30 minutes. But yeah, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening on Spotify from the future. We appreciate your ongoing support. Take care, everybody. See you later. Have a good night.